So I was thinking about that message I gave today, and you know, so the I was this all goes together. What God's been showing me about Hebrews, and when I finish my book, it's going to be called something like Hebrews, the experience of His shepherding to bring us into the good land, or the experience of His shepherding to bring us into the holiest of all as our rest. Something like that. And I thought it would be cool to have a picture of the tabernacle. Like you're looking in the front of the tabernacle and you look past the furniture and the Holy of Holies is open and it's this bright light. And then you can see that there's a pasture with a shepherd in it. But I don't think anybody could draw that. It'd be too... I asked somebody and get a response. Anyway, if you want to draw that for me, please. But, excuse me, the whole thing about Hebrews is it's the one book. It's the deepest book that I've encountered. Ephesians is deep. Colossians is deep. But, my goodness, Hebrews... you really have to go. It assumes that you're kind of a Bible nerd, and he's arguing from the point of, you understand how the whole Levitical system works, and let me show you how Christ is greater. But the point of Hebrews is that it establishes that Christ is the one who's responsible, and He is trying to subdue you. From all your staggering and wandering around in the wilderness and unbelief, He's trying to subdue that old flesh, and He is an anchor in the veil, and He is working, and He's the surety of the covenant to guarantee that you're going to enter into that inheritance, and He's been appointed to intercede for you in your weakness. And weakness in Hebrews is the temptation to go back to staggering in unbelief. In the early days when the temple was still there, it was so hard for them to grasp that there was a little man from Nazareth who raised from the dead, and now He is the high priest in heaven, and He replaced the glorious temple with the Mosaic law, the sacrifices, and all the things that they saw and smelled and handled every day in Jerusalem. They were staggering back and forth between the unseen realities represented by Christ and what they could see with their eyes. And they were like, of course we have to keep the law. Of course we have to keep the temple. That was the temptation, and that was the weakness. And we have the same kind of weakness today. Some people go to institutional church because they think that they can't get fed without it, and that they have to do all kinds of things in the institutional church system in order to stay spiritual. Well, that is the same. It might as well be the same thing. They are laboring in the holy place. They're wandering in the wilderness. And God is waiting for the whole generation of people wandering in the wilderness to die out before He could bring us into the good land. And at the beginning of at the Exodus through the Red Sea, the number of people that went through the Red Sea versus the number of people one generation later that entered the Jordan into the good land is the same, but it was an entirely new generation of people. Same number, but the generation of unbelief that God said they will not enter my rest, they all died out in the wilderness, and their children went in to the good land in faith. Well, because it's the same number, that's clearly a picture of the subduing of the natural man with his unbelief and his considerations, and the renewing of the inner man. So Hebrews and 2 Corinthians go together really well. And what God is doing is bringing us into experiences of weakness and failure so that we will give up hope in our natural man and his ability to do things. As long as we're in the natural man, we're going to be like the Israelites who said, God, did you just bring us out here to die? Because we're out of the world, but we're not in the good land. We're not enjoying our inheritance. And it's because of unbelief. And so that's what Hebrews is about, is your unbelief is interfering with your enjoyment of your inheritance. And the only way for you to be brought out of that unbelief is by God himself appointing a high priest who is an anchor, and he is bringing you in to the presence within the veil. He's a new and living way. His own body, his flesh is a new and living way. And in the study, I said it was like one of those people mover escalator things at the airport, where it's moving along from place to place, and that's the living hope. The gospel moves you in to the holiest of holies. That's the goal, is to bring you into the enjoyment of Christ. And the only thing that's keeping you from enjoying him, really, is layer upon layer of unbelief that you just can't help having, because your flesh, that's what he does. Your flesh, the continual service in the holy place, it never stopped. It was day and night, never ceasing. That shows that your flesh cannot stop. You can't stop the unbelief. You can't stop the complaining. You can't stop. But you have a high priest who helps you in your weakness. How? By interceding with groanings that cannot be uttered. Right? And what is that? He is, on the one hand, bringing you into situations. He's working all things together for your good. He's bringing you into situations that are designed to subdue the natural man and wear him out, while at the same time renewing your inner man. What is your inner man? Your inner man is your spirit, which is in the Holy of Holies, and it's also the spirit of your mind. Be renewed in the spirit of your mind. The renewing of the inner man is backed by the intercession of the high priest, who has bread and wine. Melchizedek has bread and wine, and he's Christ ministering his life to you through his intercession, so that when you're weak, he responds. When you're tempted to stagger, when you're tempted to go back to the wilderness, when you're tempted to say, no, clearly there's got to be something more I'm not doing. It can't be that I just don't do anything. I've got to do something, because if I don't, I won't get blessed, or I won't be sanctified, or I won't be pleasing to God. So I need to get to work. That is the temptation in the book of Hebrews. That is the weakness. That is the sin that easily besets us. And that is going back to milk. And that is continuing in the holy place and not enjoying your rest. And that's why we have a high priest. So it's for that very weakness that God gave us the high priest. He appointed Christ as our high priest, and he is touched with the feeling of our infirmities, our weaknesses, and he responds accordingly with sympathetic intercession. And we can sense him groaning within us sometimes, Romans 8. And through that, he renews our inner man and renews our mind and subdues our flesh. And it's just a process. It's only the Lord can do it. Only the Lord can do that. On the one hand, you need to strive to enter that rest, which means you come into the full assurance of faith, which means that you are pursuing the truth. But if the Lord doesn't reveal that truth to you, you won't see anything. So from start to finish, it's him. And, the other thing is, why is so many Christians who are genuinely saved, when it comes to the matter of sanctification, they immediately go to works and disciplines. 7 ways to do this and 6 ways to do that, and 7 highly effective things, and because they're in their natural mind. And if you say, no, that's not sanctification. Sanctification is by faith. Christ is my sanctification. Sanctification is entirely a matter of ceasing from my own works, realizing that the demand is off of me, that I died to the law, that God has no more expectation of me, and he has put me to death with Christ. And now I'm no longer allowed to be in the holy place working. I'm supposed to be within the veil, resting. They will say, no, you're just looking for a license to sin. Even the saved ones. You're being lazy. No, you need to move on and get to work. They think that's sanctification, and they're the ones who use the words discipleship and obedience a lot. And did you know that the word discipleship is not in the epistles? And obedience is usually referring to the faith. To obey in Hebrews is to not harden your heart, but to heed the voice of God speaking in his Son concerning all of this. concerning Christ as your rest, Christ as your Joshua to bring you to the good land, Christ as your high priest, Christ as your forerunner, Christ as the captain of your salvation and the author of an eternal salvation and the author and the finisher of your faith and the one who is the anchor for your soul, to bring you into the Holy of Holies, and the surety to guarantee, and the testator to guarantee that you will be brought into glory as an heir. And once you see that it's all entirely on him, and the trajectory of the Christian life is the Holy of Holies, you'll be different. It changes you because you're now dealing with something that's hidden. Remember I said that the high priest used to walk past the priests with all their busy labors. This fancy dressed guy came in with his fancier outfit and blood, walked right past him, walked into the Holy of Holies behind the veil, and disappeared. They had, like I said, they really didn't know what he was doing back there. I mean, maybe they knew theoretically, but they didn't know. They didn't experience it. They weren't allowed in. And no one's allowed in who's still laboring in their own effort. They will die in the wilderness. The old man has to be worn out. And so it is possible to live the Christian life and never into your rest. Never into the rest, but stay the whole time in your misery and in your efforts and in your failure and in your bemoaning and saying, God brought us out here to die. No enjoyment from the world and no enjoyment in the Holy of Holies. You're in between. You're not in the good land. You're not in Egypt. You're in the wilderness. So that is something we want to avoid. But also realize that those who are in the wilderness have no idea what's going on in the good land. And those who are in the holy place have no idea what's going on in the Holy of Holies. When you say, yeah, in the Holy of Holies we do nothing but rest and have the presence of God, they can take you at your word or they can disbelieve you, but they don't know the experience unless they've been brought into rest. So we see it in the Word, and that makes us different, and that's what we strive for, which makes our whole path in our Christian life different. Our definition of sanctification is different. Our definition of obedience is different. And we're accused, but it's because they don't understand. They think that the Christian life is about the holy place, and they don't understand the principle of being dead with Christ and resting in the holiest of all. They don't even believe in it because they've never seen it, because it's hidden from them. It's hidden from their eyes. Until that is made manifest to them. Hebrews says, as long as the holy place stands, with all of its ordinances and services, the way into the holiest is not yet made manifest. And for every Christian, there is the need for the way of the holiest of all to be manifest to them. And first you see it in the Word, and as you see it in the Word, and to the degree you become assured that this is really the way, this is the new and living way, this is the way, this is the straight path, this is the way of life, till you become assured of that, you really won't taste it. But once you do start becoming assured of it, you automatically start tasting it. It's so much easier for me to enjoy the presence of the Lord now than it used to be when I was in charismatic churches. We had all kinds of meetings trying to design to keep us in the presence of God and practices, but nothing beats believing the body of truth that God revealed to us about Christ. And that's what we need to focus on, and it brings us into His presence so that we enjoy life and peace in our soul. It changes us. It changes us. It gives us the reality that people seek for in their religious efforts but never find. And when we say, yeah, we're just resting, but we have the reality, they don't believe us. They call us liars. And they assume we're doing some secret sin back in the holy place. You know, this is about an interior, secret life that really only the Lord can see. The only person who can see the holy activities in the holiest of all, is you and the triune God. That's why Jesus said you have to go into your prayer closet and pray in secret, that God who sees you in secret will reward openly. What secret place? The holiest of all, Christ Himself. It's a secret journey. It's the mystery of the Christian life. And that is what I teach about, that makes things different. You know, it does. And it'll make it hard for you. It does kind of put a fence around you to where it makes it hard to fellowship sometimes, because the only way it's going to resonate with people is if they've tasted it. And not everybody's tasted it. God wants them to. This is the only thing I see in the Christian life that is held out as a promise that you kind of have to struggle to get into. It's the rest of God. Yes, we'll go to heaven and enjoy Him. And this isn't works. This is ceasing from works. Ceasing from your own works because God finished His works, and then you rest in Him just as He rested. That is Hebrews. And when you enter that rest, you'll have His presence, you'll have His joy, you'll have His peace, and you'll have the fruit of the Spirit, not by conscious effort, but because of what you are in Christ and what He is in you. You just let it be. You just abide in Him and let Him abide in you, and that abide is a rest. And for your part, to abide in Him means to believe. Because John says, if that which you heard from the beginning abides in you, then you shall abide in the Son. And this is the promise, eternal life, that He's given us. So, believing the message of the gospel and staying with it, keeping your focus on Christ, and don't let anyone teach you something that is not according to Christ. Don't listen to anybody who teaches a so-called sanctification that is a mix of Christ and your effort. That's what I really see that Christians need to grow into, is this is the meat of the word, to see that Christ is the Christian life. That's the information that's related to the holiest of all. That is Christ who is my life. And my life is hid with Christ in God. Where's that? That's the Holy of Holies. Behind the veil, nobody can see it, but you're different there. You're different when you live from there. And then people say, wow, you seem different. You're softer. You're nicer. You seem approachable. When you teach something, I can taste something different. That's from that place. And I'm not talking about a secret mystical thing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a hermit hidden experience where you're a mystic having some rapturous experience. No, I'm talking about the secret experience of you accumulating truth that convinces you that Christ has to be everything and that nothing is required of you. And it just brings you into a rest. I'm not talking about laborious prayer in the Holy of Holies in some mystical way. I'm talking about being convinced that it's all about Christ, and Christ is the only one God wants to see manifested. And so I'm just going to wait on Him. That changes everything. Hope that makes sense. It's hard to speak to. This is a really hard subject to speak clearly to. And I feel like I've been building up to it for some time. Talking about renewing, going through Colossians, going through Hebrews, now going through Romans. But it's all like, it's this language that's being built for me to be convinced. And then it's kind of like helping me to speak and share it with you guys. And I hope that some of you are getting it and really getting free of some burdens that you don't need to carry anymore. All right, talk to you later.